Um, Hey, Pikas, you found my stream. Is everything going all right? I'm trying to set up things, uh, and there's well, could rewatch the President Sunday. Um, uh, pr- the- okay, that's nice. Just need to. Okay, so wait, no, that's not right. Capture d'écran. Capture de fenêtre. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just French. Well, not French. French Canadian. So I want to. Yeah, I am using Plasma. Well, KDE is the organization. Plasma is their desktop environment. Uh, Trying to figure how to set this all up. So if I want to look at the Reddit thread where Sunday posted posted the video. Well, there's nothing much here. Only a few comments on H3H3. But if we want to watch the video, because I've seen it already. Um, mm, Wait, how do I put the camera on? It's wait, it's to put it on top of everything. Oh, there we go. Then I want to make it a bit smaller so that my camera doesn't it doesn't hide everything. So if I want to capture audio output. No, that's not it. That captures the whole. Yeah, no, it's. Uh, I'm very careful. I only share the things I want to share. Like, yeah, it's in French. I speak French. What do you want me? Uh, I'm not even logged in. You know. I like. Well, I'm logged in on the. I'm logged in on the thing, but Maybe I should use another browser. Now that I've just installed, I should set a browser where I'm not even logged in on the YouTube. Well, on the account. Wait, didn't I install Chromium? That's one thing that's kind of bad is that, well, thank you, Pippa. Uh, like the stream. I don't know if I want to reach a lot of people yet. Just until I've got everything figured out. I swear I could have installed. I would have. Oh. Oh, it failed. Okay. Just install Chromium. So there's my screen and I can see you over there though. Because I'm looking at the chat on my laptop because my second monitor is not working. So if you I'm just very new and I'm just pretty girl. I don't know how to do anything. Well, the question would be, what do I want to do? Huh? If I want to capture... Wait, there's a web option? Okay. Let's see. If I want to...
Hello, everyone.
Can you hear that?
I want to start by saying that I am genuinely saddened to have to make this video. I'll explain by the end why I feel I have to make this video, but I'm going to try to keep it brief, so we'll just get right into it. On February 6th, while streaming, Vosh attempted to save an image from a...
Okay, well, that's capturing the entirety of the desktop audio, so it's not maybe the wisest thing, but I've yet to find a way on OBS to capture a single application's audio. So, what option does anyone have any idea if I want to capture a single application's audio? On OBS more next. Yeah. Application audio capture beta. Windows 10 and 11. Do I have the Flatpak client? I probably. Yeah, it's Flatpak. Do you think you want to watch it? I have some things to say about it. Wait, doesn't capture on full screen games. How do I want to? Okay. There we go. Good.
Hello, everyone. I want to start by saying that I am genuinely saddened to have to make this video. I'll explain by the end why I feel I have to make this video, but I'm going to try to keep it brief, so we'll just get right into it. On February 6th, while streaming, Vosh attempted to save an image
The incident happened. Yeah.
from his internet browser, and this automatically brought up a folder to the screen featuring explicit pornographic images of anime girls, some very clearly underage. This was streamed to his entire audience.
You can see this is an example of the kind of structure that I'm referring to. What?
And with an audience of Vosh's size, in no universe is something like this not going...
Even with everything, it's I don't know, there's something funny about it, isn't it? Well, like just like I don't know, look at the structure, and then he brings up this folder of sexually explicit content. I don't know. It saddens me, but
to spread everywhere. And 3 days later, Ethan Klein on the H3 podcast spent 2 hours of a live stream exposing the leak to 50,000 concurrent viewers, and went over what can be diplomatically described as optically unsound clips from Vosh's past, in which he discusses issues surrounding child pornography and lolly content.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's well, like, I don't know what I could say that Sanjay hasn't already said about that. Like, the fact it reframes everything. Ethan said it.
Vosh immediately scheduled a stream afterwards, at the beginning of which I posted to his live chat that he should seriously consider whether the...
So, Vosh, not to be obnoxious, but are you sure this is a good idea? It would be so easy for this to escape. By the way,
this was a wise decision.
We're right.
Obviously, he didn't take this seriously, as he went on to try and explain away the presence of the underage content on his computer by claiming, and I kid you not, that he mistook it for short stack goblin hentai.
This is one of the reasons why stuff like this is impossible to clarify, because even talking about it comes across as like crazy defensive or whatever, right? But what else am I supposed to do? Let people like Ethan Klein lie and say that it was all like a folder?
But you let him lie. You've let him lie. You've not should have gone on. I don't know. yeah, Ethan is bad faith. Ethan is a piece of shit. Ethan is a snake. That's a. He has an audience. He has a platform that you won't ever be able to reach unless you go on that there.
Full of lolicon, or just explain it, you know? Anyway, one of the two images.
But that's the thing, you're not explaining to anyone but your audience. And your audience already is charitable to you.
Just flatly didn't look like Lolly. I don't give a shit. Like Cope, Diamond, I just don't care. Like disingenuous shit, you know? The other one is like a threesome with two chicks and a guy. And in retrospect, looking at it, knowing now that that artist is a lolicon, yeah, I can see it. When I looked at it, I think the vibe that I got was like short stack, thick kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like the way like goblins get drawn in porn. You'll have to entertain me for a moment on this presumed shared knowledge of how goblins get drawn in pornography. But you know how they're all like thick short stacks, right? That was the vibe that I got, because in the image, the girl that's shown has super thick legs and has like tits and a belly. So that's just the vibe I got. But now,
why are you doing that? Why are you? And Andy said it best. Just said was a mistake. I didn't realize. And don't try to defend the portrayal. People won't listen to you. People won't care about what you have to say.
knowing that the artist is a lolicon, which I have been roundly reminded of, obviously knowing that it was intended to be a lolly drawing. So, like, that's how it is, right?
And I didn't say anything. I mean, I watched the back and forth between Ethan and Vosh on stream. I even criticized Vosh and Ethan when their arguments were bad, and most of them were, but I didn't do what I normally would do and make a judgment. I didn't condemn Vosh. I didn't believe he was that person. So I waited for Vosh to say something else, something that would fix it.
And now there's egg on our face. There's eggs on our faces. There's like for some time I've defended Vosh on like his takes, and like I'm still sympathetic to him. He I don't think he's a like I don't think he's bad. Well, he's not a bad person because he had this material. He's bad in the way he handled the whole situation. And it just puts everyone like who's in his community. It puts them in a very bad spot. I mean, I'm probably making points. I'm making points that he makes.
I don't know what I was hoping Vosh would say. I guess I really was just hoping for some explanation. And even when he gave one, and it was completely unconvincing, I still waited. Because people often say stupid things when they panic, things they later go back and correct when they've calmed down, right? And some people, when faced with something awful, wait, like me, hoping for an explanation that will make things make sense in a way that makes the awful situation go away.
Kinda like
I don't know what I was hoping for. I can't fathom now what he could have possibly said. In retrospect, maybe there wasn't really anything that he could say that would make any of this better. But I waited. And Vosh went with goblins.
I'm not sure what he's saying. Is he saying that there's no way that Vosh could have taken back, like made things better because of his character? Or is he saying that like in any case there wasn't anything to salvage. Uh, yeah.
There was a moment in Ethan's second stream on the Vosh leak where Ethan pointed out that
if you're friends with someone in real life and you have history and you have rapport, and if something comes up that's really, concerning, you would talk to your friend, right? But these are not my friends. These are people online that I know.
Right.
And even saying I know them is kind of stretching it. It's like, it's not, this is not what you think it is.
something clicked in my head when I heard this. Like this line was directed at me. Obviously it wasn't, but it kind of felt like it. You see, I realized that I wanted to give Vosh a few days. Not simply because I liked Vosh as a person. Vosh has done genuinely good things for people in the community, from helping to raise funds for good causes or for friends in need, to defending friends when they're publicly attacked. This is someone who, in my world, in my corner of the internet, has come to matter. And it's really hard to watch someone who has come to matter to you, whose well-being you've come to care about, turn into something that disgusts you.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's gonna say how it, like, it's not the mishap itself. Everything around it makes it so much worse.
And it's hard to have a friend come under attack. But
these are not my friends.
Mm-hmm.
These are people online that I know.
Right.
And even saying I know them is kind of stretching it.
these are not my friends. These are people online that I know. And even saying I know them is kinda stretching it. I realized I was thinking of Vosh as a friend, when in reality we had only talked a couple times. I was emotionally invested due to the way our communities seemed to be entangled, not just politically, but emotionally too. People in my community genuinely care about Vosh, and this whole complex of entanglements rubbed off on me, and it impacted how I regarded Vosh as an individual. During the H3 stream, and even my own watching it, Vosh's community were there defending him, for the same reason I was waiting. Vosh is a friend, someone who has done good, someone who is genuinely beloved by his community, someone whose stupid, thoughtless edgelord takes have forced that community to defend him again and again, to bear the weight of protecting his reputation. This has happened so many times and has been going on for so long it's become reflexive.
Yeah. At what point is it like better to just move on, find someone else, create your own content? Like I'm doing. Like if you're relying that much on figure like that, or any figure by themselves, you're gonna have a bad time. You're gonna, like, no one's perfect, and there are people. Vash, sure, he's nice, but it's harder and harder to justify
People just
being by his side. Even like saying being by his side is overstating it. Like, you're not Vash's friend. No one's Vash's friends. You're supporting the person you think he should be. That's the thing with social relationship, but also even more egregious with parasocial relationship, because you have even less of an input on that. You have less. Vash cares about his platform, not you.
jump in to defend him, like they're protecting a friend. And so now, when through sheer carelessness and utter stupidity, Vaush has posted real evidence that he hoards drawn pornographic images of underage girls on his computer, his community is right there jumping on grenades defending him because he's their guy. He's their friend. But he's not. Which is why he's happy to let them do this even though they can't win. The evidence is crystal clear. He posted it himself. The grenade he pulled the pin out of wasn't for us. It wasn't for his community. It wasn't for me. It was for Vaush. And right now he's watching everyone else jump on it for him. He would watch you and me do the same, because Vaush, I realize now, is the type of person to allow his fans, this huge community he's built, to destroy themselves in his defense. To get slapped with labels like pedophile and child pornography and lolly defenders, to be made into jokes in front of the entire world. Also, he can avoid doing what he should have done as soon as that folder appeared on the screen.
Yeah, as soon, maybe not, but like 3 days later, should have gone and eaten, or 4 days, like Sunday recommended. But,
take responsibility for the disgusting images he put on his work computer and then broadcast on YouTube for everyone to see, and bear the consequences himself like an adult. Vaush isn't a friend. He's not your friend or my friend. He's someone we've watched, talked about, maybe talked to once or twice, but I don't know him. And you probably don't either. This is a guy who makes money doing a performance. The leaked images in Vaush's folder have no excuse. His self-interested behavior since the leak has no excuse either, and his claims that people have only accused him of pedophilia and defending underage pornography as part of a reactionary conspiracy to take him down have been shown to be bullshit. And I honestly feel so sorry for all the people who are reflexively defending him now. The people who have made the good things attributed to Vaush possible, who actually have made them happen, and who are being dragged down into the dirt with him, also that he doesn't have to lie in the bed he made all by himself. The people who are setting themselves on fire to keep him warm as he lets this continue.
that's a very poignant picture, isn't it? He like his take of like just rolling on, carrying everything through, like screaming through it and not like defending himself. Yeah, good words. Like he's just saying, yeah, maybe he doesn't realize how, probably should realize how it puts his community in the state, like they have to defend him, they have to do something to not be labeled or like affected by their stance towards him.
I said that I was saddened to make this video, but I want to clarify that I'm not saddened for the loss of Vaush. In reality, Vaush is not important. He's barely even there. Vaush is a cartoon character played by a man named Ian Kaczynski into his webcam. Vaush doesn't do anything. The people in Vaush's community are the ones who do things. And I'm not just saddened, but angered by the fact that Vaush has again betrayed and sacrificed them all on the altar of his self-interest and pride. And it isn't just Vosh's community that he's thrown under the bus. Vosh has positioned himself as a large public representative of a range of really serious causes that people are invested in, from trans rights to the Palestinians currently being massacred in Gaza. How the enemies of these would love to be able to point to a large community like Vosh's and point to them mockingly as pedophile enablers and child pornography defenders, like he has allowed them to be framed as. Vosh has delivered the right wing a propaganda goldmine. This is not just internet drama, this is serious business. And Vosh isn't stupid. I know that he knows better. And frankly, I'm furious that he has chosen to put his own self-interest first, at the expense of his community and the things he claims to stand for at every turn.
Selfish people. Just, I mean, that's the thing. Like, will you consider Ethan as selfish as Vosh? Probably. Well, like, thing is, I don't know if Ethan has such the same kind of link with his community as Vosh has. Like, Vosh is the big figure, well, is the only figure that people see. Like, but with Ethan, he has a whole stuff around him. He has his partner, he has his editors and everything that are with him, and which like kind of makes it clear that there's less of a link between him and his audience. You understand?
Vosh's community does not deserve this. He benefits from their support, and he benefits from his position as a public
There's more of a distance, you know? Like, yeah.
figure with a large following representing progressive causes. Vosh has a basic responsibility to prioritize these. He owes them better than this. I will not be throwing myself on a grenade for Vosh. Vosh is just a guy. But the parasocial relationships that people like Vosh cultivate in their communities make it so that one person's stupid, selfish decisions can undermine whole movements. Which is insane. Everyone pays for what Vosh has done, except Vosh. And I am making this video because even by just trying to be fair and to give him a chance to explain himself, I have been accused of parasocially defending Vosh myself. But the thing about parasocial relationships is that it's extremely hard to tell you're in one from the inside. And the embarrassing truth that I've come to realize is that even though I haven't defended Vosh, my reluctance to condemn him for what everyone can see he has obviously done is absolutely due to that same parasociality, which you never realize is there when you're the one in it. I was giving him the kind of generosity you would give to a friend. No more. I won't stand by Vosh's decisions, which have been selfish and irresponsible, and by which he has proved himself unfit to bear the responsibility that comes from having the attention and respect of large numbers of young people. And I will not defend him while he throws them under the bus to save his own skin. They deserve better. And I am done.
Yeah, it's sad. That's what it is. Not good, people. Okay. Let's go see more. See another something else. There's a video I want to watch. you're uh if you're interested in science and also philosophy or philosophy of science, there's you have many people. I've watched the video this is responding to already. I'm not sure this person, Professor Dave, is really has the equipment to deal with
Hey everyone, you may remember
that video, because it makes some claims, some things about the nature of science itself. Let's see. Okay, it should be all right. So, are you familiar with Professor Dave? Well, probably he's been around some time. He's like an atheist, science, debunking conspiracy theories and like things like that hurt and everything, like low hanging fruit that people don't. Well, that makes for good content, but well, it's like the bare minimum. Like if you want to make, you're not going to be very measured on stuff, because you're just engaging with people who you don't have to be measured against. You don't have to have a measured opinion against flat earthers or people who believe that 3,000 years ago the earth was formed and everything just happened from there. Let me change the title of the stream, because I feel like we're no longer configuring OBS. We've updated right away. Okay. So let's see. Can I scroll down? Oh, okay. Yeah. That's perfect. That's awesome. Okay. Instead of being silenced by proving science wrong, like I know that. Well, Formscape is very he's like not the best person to make the points he made in that video. I haven't watched everything at Formscape. I only watched this video, and this video didn't like, there was some iffy points, but it was kind of good appraisal of the structure of science, how science is actually dealt with politically, you know. But let's see. It's like 1 hour.
Hey everyone, you may remember some debunks I've made regarding Electric Universe and other pseudoscience in the realm of astrophysics.
Yeah, that's the thing with Electric Universe. That's the thing. He's Formscape says he doesn't defend Electric Universe in that, but he doesn't think science is equipped enough to like adapt to competing theories. It's not that, it's more complex than that.
Physics. While they don't create as big a stir as my content exposing creationists, they do result in some butthurt contrarians making videos whining about how indoctrinated I am. One such video has surfaced recently, and I'd like to dissect it for you. So let's get started.
I thought
the video is called How Science Became Unscientific, released last month on a channel called Formscapes. It's a small channel, and the video didn't really get a lot of views, so I would normally ignore it just like I would any random flat earther. But in this case, I wanted to respond because it's such an immaculate example of the precise brand of anti-science rhetoric that is rampant in society today.
Yeah, well, like that's what I feared about Form's case. I feared he would go there. He would go like, vaccines are bad, you shouldn't trust them. But he doesn't make such claims in the video. He doesn't. He doesn't. He criticizes how the scientific community, if there's such a thing, actually handles it.
It's a manipulative epistemological poison that has the potential to kill off the human race, and it's alarming how popular this type of narrative has become, even among moderately educated people. The basic premise is that real science, the kind that has given you the computer and internet and satellites that are allowing you to watch this video right now, is dogmatic, an ideology, a tyrannical worldview wielded by the powers.
But that's what it. Like, that's an institution there, and it's probably not probably not because of science itself or like the scientific method or everything. It's more because, well, we have a state. We are living in a world where those things are. Those structures, those kinds of authoritarian structures are the norm. Like, it's not that the conclusions from science that we see are wrong. There is a structure that's inherently authoritarian, that like props it up, which like gives a lot of ammunition to people who think of themselves as being against authority, because they will end up linking all those structures, all those conclusions from the process of science together, which like it's wrong. It's too simplistic of a worldview. But that's kind of a flaw of modern science.
That be to indoctrinate us while ignoring newer, better theories from super awesome rogue trailblazers. The part of the video where he talks about me is towards the end, regarding my very first debunk on Electric Universe, but there's quite a lot of build-up, so let's leave that for the cherry on top and start from the beginning. Wow, lots of ancient stuff. I can see how he fell for the Thunderbolts charlatans. Let's get a quick sampling of his general vibe.
It's simply not realistic to expect a 2-hour-long video to convince most people that their most basic convictions about the world might be deeply distorted. Those convictions serve a very real and significant psychological purpose in establishing a person's sense of groundedness and certainty about the world that they are a part of. And letting go of those convictions is far from easy or trivial for very good reasons. For many people, this video will probably feel like I'm attempting to shatter the core beliefs which ground one's sense of religious faith.
This is how cult leaders talk. They feed you the narrative that everything you know is a lie so that you are receptive to.
Well, not exactly. Like, the thing is, when you talk about metaphysics, when you talk about the foundations of what we know about the universe, you're gonna shatter everyone. Like, you're gonna shatter people's conceptions about the world. That's like, if you are a realist, you will going from a realist, I think an epistemological realist, to an anti-realist is like, it's hard. You have to step into the unknown. Well, see, like, with cults, it's, I feel, it's more about what you've been told is a lie, but here's the real truth. The truth, like, they're offering an alternative, not saying, well, like, maybe the first part of being a cult is like getting into there's alternative to your way of thinking, and then say no, there, and then go on and say no, there, well, expose your alternative viewpoint, well, not viewpoint, but like view of the world, then say no, there are no other, which that's not what's happening here. He's just saying, he's just showing you forms. Formscapes says, yeah, there are reasons to doubt everything. That doesn't mean that those aren't useful. Those aren't good ways to predict some things, but doesn't mean that they are inherently true. Stop messing with the ball of hair, you know? Okay.
To the script of lies they are about to unload. And the first part of this script is about a guy named Robert Maxwell, the one-time owner of Pergamon Press, a popular platform for scientific publications, and the only purpose here is to manipulate the viewer.
It is through Robert Maxwell's business career in publishing that the world of academic journalism as we now know it would come into being. This was a very lucrative business model, as Maxwell's clients were predominantly state-funded institutions such as libraries and universities. Ultimately, it was taxpayers who fronted the bill.
Does he need to use that? Like, well, let's see. I shouldn't be married to Farmscapes. I don't know the Farmscapes, everything. Sure, well, but is it like, is a good way to look at it, starting from this particular company has gone into the business of selling textbooks or making textbooks, and that's bad. Or do you well, if you wanted to make the critique, I would make of modern scientific system. Well, I would go more like, I would say, yeah, there's capitalism, there's those things, and that influences the way we do science, you know? So I think it's right to criticize it, and he's right to be uncharitable to Farmscapes. To like, from, yeah, I don't think he's. Let's see.
For such exclusive
Yeah.
access to these academic publications, even though the general public itself was not granted public access to them. And through this monopolization of access, Robert Maxwell and his family were able to become grotesquely affluent. Maxwell was well known to live an immensely flamboyant lifestyle, sailing the world in his luxury mega yacht named the Lady Ghislaine, named after his youngest daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah.
Over the course of subsequent decades, Robert would expand his interests into the realm of international politics, developing relations with Eastern European totalitarian regimes and becoming involved with Israeli state intelligence services.
Of course, duh. That's how we do business in the world. Yeah, that's, looking back at it, it's very. I mean, you're missing a bit the forest for the trees. This guy isn't. I don't think you can say that he's the origin of the problem. He's part of the problem, but he's just doing business at the end of the day.
1991, Maxwell would skip a scheduled meeting with the Bank of England to cruise in his yacht among the Canary Islands, and during this time he would be reported missing, later to be found dead, floating in the Atlantic Ocean. Following his death, investigations would come to reveal an immense and tangled web of fraud, financial malpractice, and theft, which would result in the utter collapse of his business empire. What is significant for our current purposes is that Robert Maxwell was the man who was, in many ways, responsible for how academic science came to be shaped after the end of the Second World War.
As he notes, Maxwell enriched himself by running scientific journals, then eventually fell out with the law and died a suspicious death. A picture of his famous daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, of Jeffrey Epstein fame, is flashed to add more drama to the implied conclusion. Scientific publishing is a racket associated with embezzlement and child sex trafficking.
Sure. He makes that point implicitly. He goes a bit deeper into that. Like, he doesn't. Like, the rest of his video, as I remember, doesn't really rely on that.
Any reasonable person would ask, why fixate on Maxwell? Did Maxwell create the scientific publishing industry? Of course not. It has existed for centuries, and there are many other far more important publishing houses than Pergamon Press. Did he have a disproportionate influence on the way publishing is done? Not by any stretch of the imagination, but Formscapes reduces the entire industry to one man.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem I said. It's that guy is not the issue. He's just doing business, and you have to criticize the just doing business part.
In order to instill in the naive viewer the impression of widespread corruption in the science world. It's a sleazy, manipulative tactic. Then he explains how science is published today.
Academic institutions require their researchers to publish research, and academic journals are able to actually charge researchers for publishing their papers. This system works because under most circumstances, the researchers themselves aren't required to actually dip into their own pockets to make such payments to journals. Rather, research grants typically include provisions for such publishing fees, meaning that it is you and I who actually pay for the racketeering practices which were instantiated by Robert Maxwell and those who followed in his footsteps.
Yeah, I like that. Professor Dave's point passes out on like maybe it should have been better to look at how science worked. Like don't make an argument about the origin that you said about that process. Make a more historical, adopt a more historical perspective from the beginning. That's why you go large instead of, because that just sounds conspiratorial. And yeah.
There are elements of truth here, but the conclusions are fallacious. Scientific publication involves research paid for by research institutions. This is refereed by scientists who perform this service for free, then entrusted to a journal which publishes the work and charges a fee for people to read it to recover publication costs. The claim that the published work is not freely accessible is more or less correct. The first problem is that the primary literature is typically not available to the general public. Of course, hardly anyone is willing or able to read a paper in the Journal of Theoretical Physics, but Formscapes pretends that science is elitist, as it hides behind exclusive and expensive portals. The second problem...
Well, kinda. Like, there's a lot of buy-in you have to do, and there are a lot of economical incentive. You just listed them. There's like, yeah, it's gonna be elitist. That's how it works.
Problem is that universities and other research organizations don't have enough funds to subscribe to the expanding bulk of journals, so we are left with a Darwinian race for survival. The best journals are subscribed to, and the others are ignored or accessed only when research...
No, that's not Darwinian. I mean, it's Darwinian in the sense that it's money that, well, it's the survival of the people. Like Darwinian in the sense that it's the survival of the fittest, and the fittest is the one that is able to make money, which is the only factor at the end. You don't have money, you don't have a journal. That's simple.
Researchers want to purchase one specific article. It is not an ideal world, but it works. To suggest that this shows corruption in science, or even that this constitutes a racket, is extremely irresponsible. The process of reliable scientific publication costs money to provide, so it costs money to consume. It's like complaining that Netflix isn't free. They need money to make the content.
Yeah, but Netflix isn't in the business of actually informing our opinions. Or like, Netflix makes documentaries, yes, they have some scientific stuff in there, but like, there's a separation there. There's like, there's a lot more reason to expect better from an institution that's supposed to help us understand the world. You know?
Content, so they charge you to watch it. Nevertheless, they are legitimate problems, and to address these problems, free access journals have arisen. Here, scientists and publishers work for free to disseminate their knowledge, but many of these journals are of mediocre quality and...
Yeah. Don't you think that that's kind of administration of the problem at hand?
poorly refereed. Even in the major journals, the expensive ones, some articles are freely accessible. The author is usually required to pay a small fee to make their article accessible to everyone, and this is happening more and more. In any case, publishing houses, which carry out the important task of organizing the review, refereeing, and publication of our best science, have a right to earn a living, just like doctors and
Yes. But that's the issue. The issue is that they have to rely on that to make a living. It's just another example of how our economic system fucks everything up.
Janitors and teachers and everyone else. It's how society works. Finally, the video claims that an author has to pay a fee to the journal before their work is published. This is not true. Could you or I publish a paper in a scientific journal cost-free? Yes, of course, there are plenty of journals which do not charge. However, any paper will be scrutinized by referees and has to meet stringent criteria of novelty and quality. To claim otherwise is a blatant lie. After this idiotic claim of racketeering, the video claims the majority of scientific papers are fraudulent, and there is a replication crisis. Scientific work is getting more and more difficult to reproduce.
At this point, we have all probably heard the murmurs of what has come to be dubbed the replication crisis within academic research. The notion of replicability is generally considered to be of central significance within the apologetics of academic science. Idealistically speaking, replication is believed to serve as a means of ensuring that the findings produced by scientific research do actually point towards the regularities of nature which science strives to reveal. If a finding cannot be replicated, then that of course casts doubt on whether the original research actually uncovered such a regularity.
Again, this is very manipulative because it is based on a kernel of truth. As science becomes more sophisticated, it becomes harder to reproduce, and it is something scientists actually take seriously. The malice lies in presenting this problem as a major crisis in science. Speaking from the little research experience I have, chemistry procedures are hard to reproduce. A chemical reaction may contain a dozen variables, and sometimes one of them is not controlled because it is not clearly identified, and this may result in discrepancies. This phenomenon is well recognized, so it's not a dirty secret. Many experiments are never reproduced because they do not create any particular interest. If the interest exists because of some broad industrial application, the procedures are repeated by many labs, and eventually any discrepancy is solved via well-planned analytical procedures. That's chemistry. Now imagine a science like biology, where experiments may contain dozens or hundreds of variables, or clinical psychology, where thousands of individual factors may affect the quality of the results. Why is it surprising that scientific data are difficult to repeat? Important science eventually gets clarified, and
But yeah, that's maybe why we shouldn't rely on stuff like psychology that much, like to and like psychology is giving us important insights, but it also has its own frame of analysis, right? It's Form Saves goes into those issues too, I think. He goes more into the physics aspect of it. I have some criticism about modern psychology. I think it makes a bunch have to think more about it. Well,
less important, flawed experiments remain innocuously in the literature, perhaps until someone decides 100 years later that they were important and they are eventually cleaned up or refuted. Humans are not perfect. Science is not perfect. Imperfection does not make science invalid. Essentially,
not imperfection, but a system that just reframe everything around the commodity production. no one's right in there. I'm making the arguments that Farmscapes doesn't really make.
This whole narrative only works on people who have never done science and have never read any primary scientific literature. They have absolutely no clue what it is to do and publish scientific research, so they are unencumbered by reality in weaving this ridiculous story about how all published science is false or agenda-driven. This is a shortcut for science deniers with zero ability to refute real science, as it's much easier to just pretend that the scientific community is invalid at its core. In order to substantiate this, some screenshots of cherry-picked fringe essays are flashed, as though the entire body of scientific knowledge can somehow be rendered invalid just by shouting fake news. This idea of most research being wrong is preposterous clickbait. Chemists develop new reactions and publish summaries of their methodology. Zoologists discover new species and publish their findings. Molecular biologists sequence genomes and map biomolecule interactions and publish their results. Astronomers discover objects in the night sky and publish images of them. The overwhelming majority of scientific output is not even remotely controversial. It's just, here's some stuff we did. Throw it on the pile of human knowledge. Science deniers try to paint all of science as a conspiracy because then they don't have to prove anything wrong. They can just point to the conspiracy they fabricated, which is what this guy does for 2 hours. Here is his ridiculous attempt to give a concrete example.
If, for example, I am a sociological researcher who is conducting research which investigates a possible correlation between political beliefs and life expectancy, I could very easily produce research which seems to show such a correlation simply because of inadequate controls. If the majority of the people surveyed are people who live in a specific geographical location, or who predominantly belong to a specific economic class or ethnicity, then it could be that my research findings come up to misleadingly depict a correlation between political beliefs and life expectancy.
Yeah, that's kind of not a good argument because, well, research, to my knowledge, they open up that possibility. They said, here's what here's our methodology. You can check it. You might find some flaws in it, and well, that's fine. I don't think those claims are made that. That's why it's more an issue of science communicators than the issue of the research itself. I think that's a bad argument. Yeah, science communicators will do those conclusions, but not usually the people who make the study,
when in reality the patterns detected by my research are due to factors which I have simply failed to take into consideration.
So he makes something up about sociology, which is not a physical science, and he just lists a bunch of things that sociologists have to control for when doing research, as though they somehow don't know about them and totally do those things. He is pretending that sociologists don't know how to do sociology.
Reality is, of course, extremely complicated, and due to the fundamentally relational nature of reality, it is never actually possible to completely isolate the factors which we wish to study scientifically, which means that there is always going to be a risk of...
I want to get into the part where he talks about metaphysics. Because I think that's the part where he will really struggle. Yeah, I think that's around. I think I'll let it
false
say
positives, no matter how rigorous we try to be.
He says that because reality is relational, it is never actually possible to completely isolate the factors we wish to study. This is totally moronic. If you're studying an ideal gas, the variables that describe it are moles, pressure, temperature, and volume. Hold two constant, measure the isolated relationship of the other two. This is an
Yeah, but that's different from sociology, where you like even even in there, like you're gonna affect the environment you're measuring, but those you can easily control for the ways that you measurement control modify the environment you're measuring. But in sociology, no, you can't. Your questions will influence how how your subjects will react, you know?
example from high school chemistry. When molecular biologists do experiments to ascertain something about gene expression or any number of other biological processes, there are painstaking measures in place to control every possible variable with different plasmids that have varying combinations of resistance to one antibiotic or another, presence or lack of a particular gene of interest, internal control vectors, empty vectors, and so forth. Scientists are clever and know how to isolate variables.
But for now, we simply need to be aware of the fact that even the most thorough and stringent research can and does fall victim to such false positives, and therefore, even if we were able to entirely eradicate fraud and malpractice, it would nonetheless inevitably be the case that many research findings would still fail to replicate.
There is something so enchanting about listening to someone who doesn't understand science improperly describe the scientific process upon a backdrop of stock footage featuring actors who are cosplaying as scientists. Wow, we looked in a microscope and now I'm pointing to some random meaningless image on my laptop. But the narrator said we didn't properly isolate a variable and nobody can possibly replicate this. Nobody else can look through a microscope like we did. It would be funny if it wasn't so offensive. And now we get to what is supposed to be the payoff of all this.
Yeah, I mean, like, this argument would be much stronger if he was focusing on, well, depends, because arguments you may say there are intrinsically tied to like physics, metaphysics. Well, metaphysics are not the same as physics. Well, definitionally.
A great deal of public and professional confidence in scientific research hinges upon the assumption that the research findings which are reported as factual are findings which have been successfully replicated. Beginning with a series of controversies which emerged during the 2010s, however, this confidence would come to be damaged in an utterly catastrophic manner. The replication crisis can be traced back to research published in 2011 by the Cornell University social psychologist Daryl Bem, within which Bem alleged to have produced experimental evidence suggestive of extrasensory perception. Unsurprisingly, Bem was viciously criticized for this research, and in an effort to discredit his findings, Bem's critics highlighted what they regarded as serious methodological flaws in his research. Essentially, these criticisms amounted to the claim that the statistical methods used by Bem in analyzing his data were inadequate. Yet, as Bem pointed out in his response to his critics, the supposed flaw in his research was in fact common practice within psychological, medical, and sociological research in general. If Bem's parapsychological findings were to be thrown out on those methodological grounds, then an enormous amount of psychological, medical, and sociological research would need to be thrown out as well for the exact same reasons.
That's right. All published science is wrong and dumb, which means that pseudoscience that can't
Yeah, but that's a thing. How do you determine pseudoscience from real science? But from the conclusions that sound ridiculous to you? Well, like, it seems like there's a flaw there. There's something wrong. If you're not able to, like, if you're only able to figure out whether something's a pseudoscience or a real science from the results and not the methodology, not the process and on how it came to. How are you sure that what you think is real science is not pseudoscience.
Managed to get published must be right. This guy Daryl Bem pretended to have evidence of ESP. Of course, scientists pointed out what was wrong with his methodology, but the narrator basically pretends that he was unfairly debunked. There is no attempt to elaborate or actually discuss the study because he has no clue and his viewers don't care. In actuality, what happened is precisely what I described earlier. Publishing ESP results is a bold claim, so bold that many people tried to reproduce the results. Reproducibility in a social science like psychology is much more complex.
Yeah, but it also that we have no idea in psychology. We have no idea. We are not. We don't have. There are like that's the issue, right? It's we have those frameworks, we have those lenses we use to analyze the human mind. Thing is, we can't. How do I like? Like we don't have an inside perspective on people's psychology. We probably will not be able to have one. And that means our confidence in those theories of mind or something are based on very imperfect evidence, but we consider them as, like, the scientific community considered them as sound. Like, seems like there's a problem there. There's like claims that could be considered extraordinary are not scrutinized because they are not. And well, those claims, like the ESP claim, is, well, extraordinary, and it is rightfully scrutinized.
Than with a simple chemical reaction, so a lot of studies tried to do it. Absolutely nobody could, so it was labeled bad science. Formscapes wants to label this process corruption, but it's the opposite of corruption.
But still, I think he's assuming he's assuming that Formscapes is arguing that means ESP is real. I don't think that's what he's arguing. I think he's saying, watch out. There's some issues. There's some issues with our process if we can prove nonsensical things with it. But we are only saved because we have other biases outside of that makes us doubt those findings. But our biases aren't informed by the science. Like, there's a disconnect there. There's our biases, then there's the scientific processes. You see? And our biases most of the time lead us to right conclusion. Like, our intuitions guide us to the right conclusions that things like ESP aren't real. But that's not scientific proof.
It's precisely how science works. Sometimes extraordinary claims get published, even in fields like chemistry or
Yeah, but you have to have a. There has to be something that informs whether a claimant is extraordinary, and it's not like it's not the process itself. It's not the study itself. It's it's our preconceived notions, and as I said, those can lead us to better conclusions. But you're still involving something that's unscientific in nature. You see?
physics. Fedyakin's polywater sensation in 1961, Benveniste and water memory in 1988, Fleischmann and Pons's cold fusion in 1989. These are glamorous examples that the press sometimes runs with in an irresponsible way. Because of the extraordinary nature of the claims, they were scrutinized, demonstrated to be irreproducible despite countless attempts, and thereby invalidated. If extraordinary claims were to represent real, viable phenomena, reproduction of results would occur, they would be deemed revolutionary, and scientists would pursue them eagerly.
Yeah, but well, it doesn't just apply to extraordinary claim. It applies to claims that fit into our perception of how things could be, how it fits into our intuitions. Those won't necessarily be scrutinized as much, but those can be as wrong as pseudoscience, things like you would call pseudoscience. You know?
As has also happened many times in the history of science. It's not that hard to wrap your head around a scientist chasing their own ego in presenting themselves as the harbinger of scientific revolution. Even highly respected and eminent ones, hence the so-called Nobel disease. In stark contrast, the idea that scientists would collectively hide new discoveries because they contradict current paradigms is just an asinine narrative to excuse delusional behavior.
He hasn't made that argument yet. You're bringing that in. Like,
here he is again, just pasting clickbait titles from magazines as though they adequately address science, while mixing in some pandemic-related paranoia for good measure. This is very deliberate, as he is now going to pivot to medical science.
The phrase trust the science is sometimes repeated like a kind of shibboleth or mantra.
Nobody who advocates for science has ever said, trust the science. This is a dumb trope used exclusively by science deniers who try to pretend that science requests blind faith. It doesn't. People who learn and understand science know how it works, and therefore are aware of the reliability of empiricism, as well as the degree to which various principles in science are at this point essentially irrefutable. This whole
that's kind of saying trust the science. Like, sure, it may be warranted. May be warranted to trust that. But you're making the same claim that he's criticizing.
whole shtick is just a meme.
Professional journalists use terms like anti-science or science denial as labels to slap on whatever group needs to be designated as the villain within whatever political narrative is being evangelized this week.
Yes, people who deny the validity of science are called science deniers. It's just literally what you are. There are no science evangelicals or science apologists. They're just people who understand science and try to explain it to those who
There are some people who jump off of accepted theories and use those arguments to convince people of that. Like, it seems like to him, to Professor Dave, like, the science is already known. Or like, Oh, that's what he's saying, right? To him, the science is already known, and there's, well, if you promote as something that's accepted as scientific, then you are innocent of pushing it, and which, like, sure, yeah, there are things that are really accepted and that are useful, or that are provable to be useful. Just, I think he's missing the point, and maybe Formscape shoots himself, or well, I use him, but I don't know their pronouns. Shoot themselves in the foot by using that language. Because, well, I don't know.
Deny it so that humanity doesn't destroy itself.
In spite of how oft-repeated and ubiquitous this attitude towards science is, the reality seems to be that we cannot and should not trust the science.
Yes, you should learn basic science so that you can understand it, instead of baselessly denying it all over the internet.
The very ideal of science is an attitude of unbiased inquiry, which does not pay reverence to established dogmas or doctrines. The great promise of science is that of knowledge which one is able to uncover through one's direct engagement with nature, rather than knowledge which is bestowed from on high by authority figures and institutions. The very concept of scientific practice would seem to be diametrically opposed to the notion of pious adherence to a corpus of established beliefs which are officially endorsed and authorized by an institutional bureaucracy.
This is another pathetic angle they take. They pretend to have reverence for science while denying science. Look at...
Wait. There's an institution there. You just talked about the institution. Is it like, is it worst thing? Is it like, is it useless? No. But there's like a paradox there. Can it ever be resolved? Can we ever resolve the paradox of, well, you have to rely on a corpus of knowledge because you can't verify everything that's assumed that scientific inquiry brings up. Like, you can't, it would take more than a lifetime, and it took multiple lifetimes of amassing the amount of knowledge we have on the world. So, is it reasonable, like, but to pretend that science is about is not about the institution is simply wrong.
Galileo, who defied authority to change the way we look at the cosmos. First, Galileo didn't develop heliocentrism. That was Copernicus, followed by Brahe and Kepler. And Galileo helped to overturn religious dogma, not some imaginary scientific dogma. Geocentrism was not dogma. It was just the best model we had until a certain time where better telescopes were built and more sophisticated measurements could be made. He made astronomical observations and performed computation.
Was it the dogma? Like, whose dogma? Because I'm not sure it, like, I'm not sure it was actually very universal. sure, people made a lot of theories that made a like someone created a model of how the orbits of the different planets and the sun would work in a geocentrist model. But I'm not pretty sure. But to me, I have to check more about it. Probably some Arab like astronomers or Arab physicists figured that out, and maybe even the Greeks before that. I have to check. But like, yeah.
Just like modern astrophysicists. The unbiased engagement with nature is indeed how science is done, and yet we will see him deny.
But no, it isn't. It isn't unbiased. It's biased according to your to previous observations. There's a problem there. You have to assume that your assumptions are correct, or that they are correct enough to be able to extrapolate from them. It's like, I wasn't sure if he would be defending that, but things like he does. Like, well, like, not defending that, but like, well, defending that presumption.
This obvious fact countless times as we move forward.
Within this notion of trusting science, we can begin to see that the very idea of science has come to split into two primary currents. On the one hand, there is the notion of science as a continual practice of investigation, actually engaging with the natural world and thereby coming to reveal the inner workings of nature. On the other hand, we have the notion of the science.
More stock footage, this time of fake students in a fake class.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, people need stock footage to make their footage more interesting. I don't know. Why are you complaining about that?
Classroom, which again perfectly exemplifies the artificiality with which the narrator pretends to know what happens in real science classrooms. Okay. Chemistry students don't recite dogmatic axioms about chemistry. They go in the lab and do chemistry.
They do the lab according to the procedures that have been written for them. Yeah, those procedures work for what they want to do. That's kind of missing. Like, he's so gung-ho on like making it like about a conspiracy theory that he doesn't get the other argument in the Formscapes he's doing.
They run reactions and learn analytical techniques to ascertain the identity of what they produce. Physics students don't just sit there and take dictation. They do physics. They replicate landmark experiments from pioneers in physics and derive these laws for themselves. This notion that science education equals indoctrination is the most transparently idiotic narrative imaginable.
But he hasn't said that. Like, yeah, maybe Dave is right to be uncharitable. And like, there's lots of things that would certainly make someone suspicious of what Formscape is saying, and there's probably better ways to say those things. He doesn't get to the crux of the issue. Yeah, those experiments, well, the country
imaginable, exclusively peddled and believed by people who have never taken a single science course in their entire lives.
Science understood as a body of facts which we are authorized to believe, or even obligated to believe, by a priesthood of professional academics whose sociological function is to tell us what is and is not a defensible belief. Ultimately, the science is, in essence, a fundamentally doctrinal form of spirituality.
This is another pathetic aspect of this narrative. People have been doing science for centuries. In particular, the 20th century saw unbelievable progress in every scientific field. As such, an enormous mountain of knowledge has been produced. If you want to learn science, you have to learn about what people have already done. That means learning facts pertaining to the history of science that has led to our current understanding. That's just how it goes. Pretending this process is somehow dogmatic is like pretending that learning a foreign language is dogmatic. Look at these priests, all reciting the same script about what these strange words mean. None of them are free thinkers. They just regurgitate their indoctrination. They all give the same definitions because that's what the words mean. This is how you...
The comparison to a language is kind of is interesting. And also because those aren't perfect. Those aren't perfect analogs. There's an assumption that language can be translated. There's like that there aren't, like if we take French enchanté to English nice to meet you, well, there's an issue there, right? Enchanté in French means, yeah, it can mean the same. That's nice to meet you. It also can mean, well, it's also enchanted in English, something magical, or there's a lot more meaning there. Well, yeah, there's the common language in science. There's a common ways, and those are the means that you do science. But language isn't a static thing.
You learn a language, and it's also part of how you learn science. You learn facts about what we have already uncovered about the physical world and the context in which we learned it. If you're too much of a lazy crybaby to do that, just admit it to yourself and keep quiet, because science isn't dogma. You're just stupid.
Beneath the specific empirical claims made by actual researchers or the facts and theories which are formally sanctioned by textbooks, we find within the core of the science a very specific complex of metaphysical assumptions about what the world must be like and what can or cannot qualify as true or real. It is furthermore a system of belief which conditions the way we think about what sorts of opinions can be considered respectable, and thus the structure of the science comes to condition the relationships between belief and social capital. Those who are well-informed and well-educated believe certain things, and
more about capital in itself.
Therefore, such beliefs come to serve a sociological function as a signifier of social respectability.
And this is where he pivots, knowing that he's totally incapable of refuting actual science, so he starts to blabber about...
But that's not about refuting actual science. Hasn't it always been about metaphysics? To me, it was about Like, the methodology of science is
about metaphysics. He has to generate a false dichotomy. There is reality, which he refers to as a belief system, and then some fabricated alternative, which he can use to promote his fantasy.
that's not a dichotomy. That's not a. And to call your belief system reality, you're making a leap. You're already making an affirmation about the world that you can't prove. It's like it's a very realistic way of seeing the world, right? But well, you have to admit that some things that seem intuitively implausible to you might actually be true. That doesn't mean that like anything anyone says might be true. But well, you can't actually use the argument that it's real. I'm just dealing with reality to justify your entire thing, right?
These and try to put them on level ground alongside reality. In actuality, people who get an education actually learn things. That's the social capital. They're educated and can apply their knowledge to actually create and achieve things. People who get engineering degrees can build machines. People who get chemistry degrees can build molecules. People who don't study these subjects can't do these things and just whine about it on the internet.
Many scientists aren't exactly all that eager to publish findings which might call into question, for example, the adequacy of Darwinian natural selection in actually explaining the nature of life, even though there are many reasons to believe that natural selection does not give us a complete understanding of how life evolves, whence life originated, or how speciation actually occurs. Yet to question the Darwinian paradigm would be to risk affiliating oneself with creationists or other structures of belief which have been deemed anti-science.
He finally decides to make specific scientific references and immediately humiliates himself. Surprise, surprise, he's an evolution denier. He starts regurgitating.
No, that's not his argument. There, I'm sorry. Am I wrong there? His argument is that we like it comes across like that, and I think Dave has a reason to react like that, and that's not how I would engage with the subject too. And Farm's case, I think, makes better a better argument later on, so I think that was misplaced.
The apologist's script about how natural selection doesn't explain everything, when every biologist from 1900 onward would tell you that themselves. There are many evolutionary mechanisms, not just natural selection. This moron knows about none of them.
Sure. Wait, paleontology isn't really an explanation? Not sure about that.
He just spews neo-Darwinian like he's an intern at Discovery Institute. We've beaten this to death in my Discovery Institute debunks, so let's move on.
But if we understand the controversy in terms of doctrine, ideology, and notions of sacred knowledge, then the motivations at work here begin to become much clearer. The letter of protest against the New Trends in Evolution conference was not about science. It was about the science, the conception of science as a body of sacred doctrines. Whether one affirms, questions, or denies such sacred knowledge is much more a matter of moral commitment to a particular ideological structure than it is a matter of evidence or rational arguments.
Yes, if we look at it in the context of ideology, we see that only ideology could be responsible for pushing anti-science rhetoric as real science. Part of this ideology involves pretending that the fruits of empirical science are an ideology. A denial of evolution is a denial.
Like, I'm not married to Farmscapes. He's making some bad arguments. But same time, Professor Dave isn't really equipped to make a proper rebuttal. He's just not like, he makes some arguments that aren't convincing to me.
Of the field of biology. So biologists will point out this absurdity, and charlatans will call that adherence to doctrine, because they have zero ability to actually discuss science. Remember, science isn't dogma. You're just stupid.
Oftentimes the rhetoric and apologetics of the science tends to take the form of an implied distinction between real science and pseudoscience. We are often assured by scientific media outlets and science popularizers that there is a clear and definitive difference between science and pseudoscience. Science can be true or false, but pseudoscience is said to be somehow worse than false. Pseudoscience is said to violate the rules of science, and therefore is not even worthy of consideration alongside the real, respectable science, which is said to follow the ritualistic procedures of science in the correct, orthodox manner.
He basically just defines pseudoscience and then baselessly scoffs at the definition. Yes, pseudoscience is charlatanry masquerading as science. Like Deepak Chopra, whom he flashes from this famous clip where Sam Harris shits all over him to thunderous applause. He pretends that people use the term pseudoscience to brand.
Like, yeah. And probably Sam Harris knows more about that than Deepak Chopra. I don't know about either. Well, I don't know about Deepak Chopra. And I'm not watched it. There's still issues with Sam Harris. There's lots big issues.
Science they don't like, when in reality, science deniers just use words like dogma and indoctrination to brand real science they don't like. Educated people can indeed explain in great detail why something like homeopathy is pseudoscience, and have done so countless times. Science deniers just ignore it and spew their anti-establishment script.
Yeah, I think the distinction between like just false science and bad and pseudoscience is that pseudoscience is motivated. Like, it's motivated by other incentives. Then, well, like, the thing is, like, it's actually pretty hard to distinguish science and pseudoscience in a clear way. Because then you look at how everything is motivated in society. And sure, you can point to things that are clearly motivated to sell a product. Pseudoscience that's clearly motivated to sell something or to promote an ideology. You know? By saying token, there's motivations, but like behind regular science too. Huh?
Those ideas allow us to make sense of things that previously seemed mysterious. Do the ideas allow us to see things which previously went unnoticed? If yes, then we continue to use those ideas, at least until we find ourselves at an impasse, at which our ideas are no longer adequate and therefore are in need of reevaluation. If not, we simply go back to nature and back to the drawing board and try again.
This is subtle but important. He's pretending to value the scientific process and shows stock footage of a telescope and photosynthesis, and is admitting that we can do science that produces useful knowledge. But then he says that when an impasse is reached, our ideas need reevaluation. What is this impasse, and what does reevaluation mean? Usually by
anything.
impasse, they are referring to something totally fabricated
That's it.
that science doesn't seek to explain because it isn't a real thing. And by reevaluation, they mean throw away an entire field of science that does successfully explain and predict.
That's a leap. So I guess you could, like, Professor Dave has a lot of experience from dealing with pseudoscience people. So it is justified, I guess. Maybe not here. Well, it is justified here, but is it right? Is it good here? Maybe not.
Many things. This is what frauds do with astrophysics. They want to inject their pseudoscience into the scientific discourse, so they manufacture some kind of crisis, something science can't explain, sometimes real, sometimes imaginary, and then pretend that their pseudoscience can explain it, which it can't, while also ignoring everything that real isn't a real thing. And by reevaluation, they mean throw away an entire field of science that does successfully explain and predict many things. This is what frauds do with
Well, yeah. Thing is that your model predicts things doesn't mean that it is correct. Like, there might be a model that's larger that predicts the same things, but also can predict more things. But using the radically different radically different process to explain those things.
Physics. They want to inject their pseudoscience into the scientific discourse, so they manufacture some kind of crisis, something science can't explain, sometimes real, sometimes imaginary, and then
wait. Okay. That there's something real should make you reconsider, make you reevaluate. That there's real issues should make you reevaluate. Like, are we just discounting the actual process of science? Like, seems like you're implying that there's a fundamental reality beyond that. Behind your theories, which I don't think you can prove.
Pretend that their pseudoscience can explain it, which it can't, while also ignoring everything that real science does explain. When charlatans try to assert this narrative, they hope that the viewer does not understand a very basic and obvious principle of scientific progress, which is this. No matter what new innovations occur, no matter what new data arise, no matter how dramatic a paradigm shift, new science must always explain observable phenomena as well or better than existing science. You can't strip away a theory, whether ancient or modern, and replace it with absolutely nothing, something that fails to explain what the previous theory explains trivially.
And I don't think that's what he's arguing for.
When you look at the advent of modern physics, equations in relativity and quantum mechanics all break down to Newtonian equations in the limit of the slow and large. Newtonian mechanics emerges from these equations in these limiting cases. I'm not speaking metaphorically, this is literally true. When you look at the time dilation equation, if you input a velocity that is negligible compared with the speed of light, it algebraically reduces to normal kinematics. Classical conceptions of momentum emerge from quantum mechanical equations. The old paradigm is contained within the new one, so modern physics does not negate Newtonian mechanics. Far from it. It is an extension of the physics we already know, thereby continuing to explain everything we already understood, but then also elucidating previously cryptic areas like the realm of the subatomic and things traveling near light speed. Classical physics is still profoundly useful in realms where relativity or quantum mechanics would complexify things unnecessarily, like macroscopic terrestrial motion. For those who don't like physics and math, here's an analogy. There's a crime scene. You have a dead body, a murder weapon, some footprints, some fingerprints, blood stains, and all kinds of other pieces of evidence. A detective will try to figure out what happened by determining what best fits the evidence. According to a receipt, this weapon was purchased by person X. Their fingerprints are at the crime scene, and they had a motive, so person X is likely the killer. This could be right or wrong, but it is objectively the most likely explanation, and if someone wants...
Well, not objectively. I mean, I kind of nitpick, but I hate how people use objectively.
Wants to propose an alternate explanation, it has to have at least equivalent explanatory power as what exists. Let's say someone suggests that instead, a tiger escaped from the zoo and killed the victim. All right, based on what? Is there any specific tiger-related evidence? Did you find tiger hairs? Tiger footprints? Are there any reports of tigers escaping from nearby zoos? The victim was shot by a gun. How did a tiger do that? How do you explain the fingerprints and blood that match the suspect? There is a hypothesis that is supported by evidence, and an alternate explanation is put forward that is not only baseless, but also has no ability to explain the data as well as the existing hypothesis. It's bogus. The detective will call it out as ridiculous, not because he's being dogmatic.
I think calling it the dogma is like all that religious language. Kind of detracts from the underlying reasoning. Like comparing it to a religion or like an organized religion is kind of a mistake there for that reason. Because it's too particular. Religion has too many connotations that don't apply there. It's a system of power at the end of the day, like everything else.
But because he knows how to do his job, and he knows when someone is full of shit and shouting tiger for no reason.
The notion of falsification is often casually referenced in debates about such validity or the lack thereof, but this idea is very rarely examined in detail by science apologists. More often than not, the idea is simply gestured towards as a way of casually dismissing ideas that aren't supposed to have a seat at the table. It is said that real science must be falsifiable, and that pseudoscientific claims are those which appear to be scientific but which are in fact unfalsifiable.
He then goes on a long rant about Karl Popper and falsifiability as though he knows how to falsify scientific claims, and just generally demonstrates the problem with people who read some philosophy books and then pretend to know how science works. He predictably refers to Kuhn and the concept of paradigm shift because he's priming the viewer to believe that real science is nothing more than a failed paradigm that should be abandoned for pseudoscience, which he implies is a newer, better paradigm rather than just some charlatans on the internet.
The early explorations of pre-science then give rise to what Kuhn dubbed normal science, within which the basic explanatory and conceptual structures of the developing paradigm begin to concretize as a morphologically mature program of research, with well-defined epistemological horizons which are delineated by the core metaphors which have now become the beating heart of the paradigm. It is within this phase of normal science that falsification tends to become essentially irrelevant. The core metaphors, and thus the core theoretical frameworks which are erected around those core metaphors, have come to be fully entrenched, and as such, conflicting evidence tends to be simply ignored, hand-waved away, or accommodated by minor ad hoc adjustments to the original theoretical frameworks.
He pretends that new theories can only make ad hoc adjustments rather than face being falsified, which is ridiculous. There are countless examples of theories being discarded after being falsified. When contemplating the mechanism of a chemical reaction, multiple possibilities may be put forward, and then studies are done to gather data that can potentially falsify some of the possibilities. This is how we discern reaction mechanisms. And most importantly, he pretends that because paradigm shift is a thing that sometimes happens, he can then point at any science he doesn't like and just call it an obsolete paradigm without basis. These are the trap doors that the science denier uses to cast doubt on the body of modern scientific knowledge amongst people who never studied science and have no ability to validate this knowledge for themselves. He flashes phylogenetic trees as if to imply that evolutionary biology is undergoing some sort of crisis, which is totally idiotic. The implication is that because taxa can be rearranged, that the whole concept of the phylogenetic tree should be abandoned. In reality, taxonomy is a perfect example of where his philosophical mental masturbation totally breaks down. The tree of life is profoundly solid. There are broad aspects to its organization that absolutely will not change. Only if you zoom way in and look at individual phyla or much smaller taxa for which specimens have only been collected over the past few decades, then there is more research to be done.
Well, you're still referring to a body of science. Well, probably it will not change. That's not... well, you can only do that by... You can only know that if you know everything. Like, you can say it's probable, but you can say it will never change. Yeah.
Regarding morphology and genetics that will help us place smaller clades where they ought to go. And indeed, these placements are constantly being revised by zoologists, microbiologists, and other researchers. But these revisions, and the fact that such revision occurs at all, specifically strengthens the tree of life. Its principles are being used in conjunction with novel techniques in genetics to great efficacy by thousands of researchers to produce agreement about the natural world. This is the precise opposite of the priesthood protecting sacred knowledge he intends to convey. Science is somehow dogmatic and unchanging, but also constantly going through paradigm shifts. The moron can't make up his mind.
If we are led to believe that there are no metaphysical or ideological presuppositions which underpin science, then we are much less likely to raise awkward questions about whether or not those presuppositions themselves might be distorted.
Yeah, there are metaphysical assumptions behind science. And Well, denying that makes you a naive realist.
Distorting our conception of the world. This has thus allowed the apologists of the science to depict science as though it were a kind of elite priesthood of individuals who are the appointed curators of a body of sacred knowledge.
He then devolves into a seemingly never-ending sermon about metaphysics over stock footage of fractals that can be summarized as, "But how do you know science is right when there's all this crazy magic I want to believe?" He again pretends that falsifiability is a charade because theories are always revised to evade falsification, obviously remaining intentionally vague because there have been countless instances in which theories have been conclusively falsified and abandoned. Spontaneous generation, miasmatic theory, phrenology, the ether, Einstein's static universe, phlogiston, geocentrism, and it happens all the time today as well, in astrophysics, molecular biology, everywhere. Furthermore, antithetical to paradigm shift, when models are revised to fit new data, this is also how science works. In 10th grade chemistry, we are all supposed to learn about the evolution of atomic theory, from Dalton's little billiard balls, to Thomson's plum pudding model, to Rutherford's nuclear model, to Bohr's energy levels, to Schrödinger's conception of electron orbitals. This is the clearest depiction of the progress of science imaginable. None of these models were wrong. They were just less complete than the model that...
Wait. What's the distinction between wrong and incomplete? I'm sorry. Like, maybe it's that, like, you can modify it to you can modify it later to make it to, because like if someone continues to use the plum pudding model or the Dalton's model, then they are not wrong, even though we have found better ways to model atoms. It seems to make sense to me. If something incomplete, then it is wrong.
that came next. Bohr's energy levels define the principal quantum number, which is part of the system of quantum numbers that describe the atomic orbitals. Even going all the way back, Dalton's laws of definite and multiple proportions that he used to substantiate the existence of atoms are still true today.
Oh yeah, well, he was able to predict things with his model. And models which you have described as pseudoscience can also predict some things. What's from distinguishing a model that's simply incomplete from a model that's pseudoscience?
When subatomic particles were discovered, it didn't render atomic theory obsolete. It became more refined. The model improves to fit the data. If someone wants to propose some alternate model for the structure of the atom today, they have to be able to explain everything that every chemist has ever done for the past 150 years. So if some science-illiterate fraud on the internet tried to do that, any chemist would laugh right in their face, not because they're being dogmatic, but because their knowledge of chemistry affords them the ability to see how preposterous the fraud is and how demonstrably false their script is, totally incompatible with an enormous interconnected body of knowledge that already exists. Science isn't dogma. You're just stupid.
Many of the theories which we have looked at on this channel in previous videos, such as electric universe theory, morphic resonance theory, inheritance of acquired characteristics, and even integrated information theory, have been denounced as pseudoscience in such a way as to imply that these theories somehow violate the supposed rules of science.
And we finally get to the meat of what this guy pushes, electric universe. He can cry all he wants. Electric universe is pseudoscience. It is magic masquerading as science. The people who push it don't actually do science. Certainly not anyone at Thunderbolts, and no, not even Sapphire. I'm not going to rehash all my debunks on this topic, so let's just see where he takes it.
Such machine technologies came to directly condition the manner in which science was practiced and even condition the form of scientific theories themselves. The laws of thermodynamics, for example, came about specifically through efforts to develop and understand the behavior of steam engines. As such, these laws proved to be very useful in development of such technologies, but beneath the surface, we can see that this metaphor was being extended to nature in general. Scientists came to generalize these laws to the cosmos as a whole, and essentially came to think of the entire universe as being like a vast, expanding container of cooling steam.
First, he goes on a long rant about how much of what we know
that can be disproved. That like we'd have to look. I have to research what like what actually happened, how the laws of thermodynamics were researched or adapted.
regarding
But
thermodynamics was developed through studying steam engines. Therefore, physicists arrogantly view the universe as a machine and misplace assumptions about how the universe works. This guy clearly has never studied any thermodynamics. Chemical reactions are not machines, and we study the energy transfer.
they are. Well, I mean, you measure them through machines. You think that the steam engine doesn't have chemical reactions in it?
Associated with chemical processes. Energy is a concept that is absolutely fundamental to the natural world, and he knows nothing about it.
Due to this alleged weirdness of the quantum world, the mechanistic manner of understanding nature proved to be simply inapplicable. Atoms, molecules, and electromagnetic phenomena could no longer be understood as being composed of tiny machines. But in the wake of this inadequacy, academic science did not simply throw out the machine metaphor. The metaphor had simply become far too entrenched within academic culture, and moreover, Western countries were beginning to become even more drastically technologized, and science was beginning to fully assume its role as a kind of priesthood which would serve to legitimize these social transformations through perpetuating the meta-narrative of scientific, technological, and liberal democratic progress.
Now we get to the quantum realm and some pageantry about how the indeterminacy of this realm somehow invalidates the process of gathering scientific knowledge.
It doesn't invalidate it. Also tells you that there's more out there. There's other things out there than validate anything in particular. Just you should know about those things, not dismiss them out of hand.
And creating technology with it. This is bananas dumb. He is labeling the scientific community as a priesthood that is defending the creation of technology without bothering to acknowledge that the mere existence of technology is proof that our scientific understanding is valid.
No, it is not. You don't need to know how fire works. How fire, you don't have to know how fire works to make fire. Same thing with AI. AI doesn't need to have a mind in itself to do things. That you can make things that work doesn't mean you understand. You have a complete understanding of the underlying mechanisms. just a basic failure in your reasoning.
If our understanding of the universe was illusory, we wouldn't have technology. We wouldn't have light bulbs and refrigerators. We wouldn't have planes and satellites and computers. Quantum mechanics exists, and we
Well, even then, we don't know how the human body works, yet we use it. Like we don't know exactly how the human brain works, but we use it. We are seeing the world through that brain. We for a long time we didn't know how the body works. We knew that we had to eat. We knew that we had to breathe. We knew those things. It doesn't mean that you have a complete model for understanding the world.
also make machines. There is no contradiction here. There is no sacred mystery. Physicists who study quantum phenomena learn about them and come to understand them. People who don't study these things don't. That the quantum realm is profoundly counterintuitive and can rightfully be perceived as strange by our human brains doesn't mean that it is a dimension of magic and mystery like charlatans pretend it is in order to sell books and meditation.
Yeah, well, he's framing this through any other pseudoscience.
Retreats, as we discussed in my debunk of quantum mysticism.
The vast majority of the things which astrophysicists believe they know about the history and structure of our universe, the vast majority of the conclusions which are triumphantly proclaimed on public television by figures like Carl Sagan, Michio Kaku, or Neil deGrasse Tyson, are such inferences which are built upon the assumption that our cosmos is driven primarily by gravity, and that gravity operates through space-time curvature. Throughout the subsequent history of the 20th century, following the development of general relativity, astrophysicists would come to make many extremely confident proclamations about the origins of our universe, the age of our universe, the expansion rate of the universe, the life cycles of stars and galaxies, the ultimate fate of our universe, and the existence of unobservable entities such as black holes. Every step of the way, all of these inferences were depicted as factual, and the general public was repeatedly assured that these inferences were made with extreme confidence on the basis of incontestably well-established theories by elite professionals using the most cutting-edge technology available to mankind. All the while, every single one of these inferences was made on the basis of a theory which was demonstrably incomplete at best, and at worst, simply false.
And we now get to his pathetic posturing about how
well, I don't think it's well, I mean, sure, it's false. It's well, I like if we take the same framing as he's had to being incomplete means that it is false by itself. Yeah, well, like, that's the thing with saying that something is false. Well, like that assigning true falseness to things. You can't really do that. But still, even that there is the mistake he's making, that Formscapes is doing, is that he's assigning a falsity to things when he like he removed that possibility out before that, so it's kind of weird. Like, either everything incomplete is false, or things that are incomplete are just incomplete. Like, I think it's not great to assign a falsity to things, to those theories. Too strong. You're overreaching. Yeah. Because by the same token that you're saying that those other theories aren't necessarily false. By those same criteria, you're also letting the possibility that the current dogma, the current paradigm isn't necessarily false too. So yeah.
How nebulous our understanding of the universe truly is. How it's just a bunch of assumptions based on relativity.
Well, yeah, it's a bunch of assumptions. We have to assume that our senses can tell us accurate information about the world. First, there's a base assumption. Maybe the objective is to have only that as an assumption. And yeah.
Cosmology in the age of the universe, astrophysics and the life cycle of stars, it's just a bunch.
I see that. I don't know if that's just a bug that just makes me that makes my other laptop count as 2 viewers. But I don't know if anyone else is watching. But anyway, I think I can make a video from that. I have to see. I'm not really good at editing videos. If you're there, please
Of conjecture. It totally isn't based on centuries of painstaking observation and calculation. This really is the main problem with science deniers like this. Because they never studied any science, because they have no clue how science is done, they confidently assert their profound ignorance over the entire scientific community. The mountain of observational evidence that supports figures like our estimated age of the universe, that being the cosmic microwave background radiation, galactic recession velocities, observable ratios and elements, as well as subatomic particles, successful simulations, it all simply doesn't exist to them because they refuse to learn about it. And
you're assigning too much baggage to what Formscapes is doing. I'm sorry, yeah, there's mistakes and there's assigning too much to Formscapes.
they act,
which isn't justified by what he said already in the video.
As though their laziness negates the scientific process. He sarcastically mocks well-established theories, professionals, and cutting-edge technology that are all used to validate the existence of things like black holes, and just baselessly denies them. He pretends that scientists wake up every day in a cold sweat, worried about public perception of their work. It's totally delusional. Scientists do their science. They don't need the approval of some jerk on the internet who will never lift a finger to learn about what it is that scientists do.
Thousands of professional academic careers came to be built upon a foundation which was known to be, at best, incomplete, and yet the professionalization and institutionalization of science over previous decades had created incentive structures which strongly discouraged skepticism towards the prevailing paradigm. There was a lot of money on the line, and resisting the mainstream meant risking the possibility of being ostracized by one's professional community, and therefore risking one's career and livelihood.
This narrative never ceases to perplex me. He acts as though all the grant money in a field is tied to a specific theory. Grant money is tied to science that produces results. If that means further corroborating a theory,
But produces results that are relevant, right? Like, not. Wait. Oh no, it's just my. Like, not every scientific project will be funded. It's because, well, there's other things at play here. There's other financial incentives at play here.
money is there. If that means falsifying a theory, the money is there. Whatever advances science into new territory has a shot at practical application and could thus potentially be lucrative and worth funding. This narrative of all scientists clinging to a failing paradigm for cash is just so profoundly idiotic and antithetical to how science works and how money works that it discredits any person who spews it at face value. People don't waste billions of dollars for pride, period.
As early as the 1930s, astronomers who attempted to calculate the mass of distant galaxies realized that if galaxies are indeed held together by a gravitational force which operates in the manner implied by general relativity, then galaxies do not have nearly enough mass to actually produce the gravitational force needed to actually hold them together. In other words, if general relativity were correct, then we would expect these galaxies to fly apart rather than maintaining their form, and moreover, they shouldn't have been able to actually form in the first place. There is no known phenomenon within the standard cosmological model which could account for this discrepancy, and so one might idealistically assume that this would have led astrophysicists to cast doubt upon the veracity of general relativity. But for reasons which we've already examined, astrophysicists were unwilling to actually do so, and those who were willing to express skepticism towards relativity cosmology were typically ridiculed as out-of-touch quacks. Instead, physicists proposed the existence of dark matter as a way to resolve this discrepancy.
Then it's off to the races whining about dark matter, which will surprise nobody. It's all just crazy ad hoc lunacy to save relativity. Or it's science you don't understand and baselessly attack because physicists have enough whimsy to refer to it as dark matter instead of non-baryonic matter. And this triggers your little pea-brain into it.
What is non-baryonic matter?
Attack mode. Of course, he makes no mention of all the countless calculations and observations that validate general relativity, the perihelion precession of both Mercury and stars closely orbiting the supermassive black hole at galactic center, gravitational lensing, gravitational waves, and more, because that wouldn't...
Yeah, those can explain it. Those can support it.
Suit his narrative, now would it?
Yet for academic doctrinal science, science which has come to be understood as an elite priesthood of sacred knowledge, this conclusion is simply unacceptable. There is simply too much at stake. For many decades now, science popularizers have repeated and reinforced the idea that the knowledge which has been sanctioned by the elite is knowledge which can be relied upon with certainty. Thousands of professional careers have been built upon the theories which have come to be regarded as doctrine and which have been systematically taught to students and the general public as facts, not as mere conjectures or possibilities.
In the end, this script all rests on this one completely idiotic notion that scientists all over the world would continue to do science that doesn't work.
Not that it doesn't work. It's that is that there's some. It's based on some assumptions, and those assumptions may be correct. They may, well, not correct, but like maybe too accurate results. Maybe. Like, but it doesn't mean that you have a complete understanding of things.
that grant money would continue to magically appear all over the world for science that doesn't work. You have to be an intellectual toddler to entertain this notion. It's like pretending that the Wright brothers would keep trying the same failed model over and over again, never figuring out how to fly, while scoffing at other inventors that have blueprints for a plane that will fly, but for some reason never actually build it. This is what science deniers want you to believe.
Mr. Dave runs a very popular science YouTube channel, which serves essentially the same sociological function as other forms of science apologetics, and his views are very standard with regards to forms of scientific research which fall afoul of institutionally authorized doctrines.
And now we get to the section about me. Oh goody. Yes, my channel is nothing but a collection of accepted doctrines. All of these lectures on organic chemistry, it's nothing but dogma. Molecules aren't actually real, you see. Neither are cells.
Hey. Not what's been said. It's not what's been said. Talk about the mechanisms of, like, not saying that those are completely false, though. Like, Formscapes has shot themselves in the foot multiple times. That there, because like, we made a claim of falsity, which that's not something you can make. Like, well, not according to an anti-realist framework.
Or human organ systems. Anyway, as I said, he's going to have a hissy fit about my very first debunk on Electric Universe, so here we go.
In this video, Dave tries his hand at dismantling the theoretical framework of electric universe theory, an alternative cosmological model which we have looked at a bit already in previous videos. Electric universe theory is a theoretical framework which proposes that the primary driving force in cosmic evolution and morphogenesis is in fact electromagnetism rather than gravity. Electric universe theorists essentially abandon Einsteinian cosmology and instead try to model phenomena such as star formation and galaxy formation in terms of electromagnetic forces, rather than relying predominantly upon the effects of gravity.
Electric Universe is not a theory, it's pseudoscience. A theory is a model that correlates data and makes falsifiable predictions. Electric Universe is a bunch of bullshit that charlatans spew to make money on the internet. That all cosmic phenomena are determined chiefly or even partly by electromagnetism is a non-starter at face value, because electromagnetism is both attractive and repulsive, while matter exerts an exclusively attractive influence. Gravity. Bulk matter is electrically neutral. That's really all you need to prove that Electric Universe is stupid. But let's continue. We know for a fact that this equation describes our reality. We use it to calculate the trajectories of objects both on Earth and in space, and they are always corroborated to high degrees of precision. Alright, so I showed Newton's law of universal gravitation, explained that it is used to make predictions that are corroborated to high degrees of precision, and this idiot comes back with nuh-uh.
Well,
Where did
you actually said that quantum physics are a better way of explaining it? Huh? Well, I mean, it's kind of being pedantic, I think. Well, yeah, Newtonian physics don't aren't perfect. They are good enough. They aren't a representation of reality, but they are good enough.
just see that exactly? Because here's reality. Every satellite in orbit, every probe that has ever navigated the solar system, every comet that shows up exactly where we say it will when we say it will. How do we do that? Newtonian mechanics. Can you make those predictions, Formscapes? I know you can't, even using real physics, but you sure as hell can't do it without it. We landed a probe on a comet, for crying out loud.
Okay,
Using
sure, yeah. You already said that Newtonian physics is insufficient. What's oh, what makes a model that can predict things but fails at some level different from another model which can predict certain things but also fails at another level? Does it make more sense to move to an unified thing that can actually predict everything, a synthesis that can actually predict what the other models can predict, and some?
In our physics, we performed calculations so sophisticated and precise that we were able to launch a probe from Earth and make it land on a comet. What is that, Formscape's blind chance? Can you land a probe on a comet?
Can you lit a fire? Can you light a fire? Like, yeah, that you can do those things doesn't mean you have a fundamental access to the truth of the matter. Just
Can any electric universe morons land a probe on a comet? No? Then shut your dumb mouth. Newtonian mechanics isn't invalid just because you're too lazy to learn about it. Maybe one day you'll find the courage to do so, and I have plenty of classical physics tutorials that can help you get started. But until then, try to accept that science isn't dogma. You're just stupid. Furthermore, we understand electromagnetism at least as well as we understand gravity. We have electricity, we have an understanding of materials science, semiconductors, batteries, and other assorted phenomena. So how is it that we understand gravity so well and electromagnetism so well, but not well enough to realize that one is the other? But in the end, Electric Universe is just another flavor of paranoia and mysticism, as I will demonstrate for you here.
Now, to begin with, we can see that Mr. Dave begins his entire deconstruction on the presumption that electric universe theory essentially amounts to a reduction of gravity to electromagnetism. This is already misleading. Not all electric universe theorists presume that gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon.
Then he flashes clips from Wall Thornhill and idiot copycats to pretend that I'm somehow misunderstanding what they say. I'm not, at all. It doesn't matter whether they're saying gravity can be replaced by electromagnetism or that gravity has an electromagnetic component.
okay. Yeah, that's the problem with using, like, to want to make the point that there are some problems about science. To use examples of people with, to use specific examples of people with theories kind of means, like dissenting theories kind of means, like, it means that your broader points will be dismissed because you're providing assent, even like an appearance of assent only to those theories. And well, those people who can disprove those theories will dismiss your other criticisms, but they may be out of hand. That's, well,
It doesn't matter the degree or flavor. It's
that's kind of irresponsible.
just wrong. He conveniently skips over all the ways in the video in which I demonstrate conclusively that it's wrong. He says I'm being flippant, when in reality he is flippantly ignoring the fact that I spent 20 minutes outlining very simple and intuitive ways in which researchers could easily demonstrate an electromagnetic component to gravity with very simple experiments that could be done in a middle school classroom. He has no response, so he just pretends I didn't do that. He says I'm not willing to consider any model EU proposes, but there is none. It's all just stories of ancient civilizations making cave paintings about lightning in the sky, or stars as anodes, and other laughable appropriation of scientific terminology in ways that contradict basic physics. When I conclusively prove that something isn't true, and you refuse to engage with what I said to prove it at all,
He's trying to engage on another level than that, but Formscapes ultimately fails in that. It's
you're the one hiding behind ideology. You're the one desperately clinging to the narrative where the underdog must dethrone the evil authoritarian dogma. He is totally incapable of engaging with the actual meat of the video, so he doesn't show any of it and retreats to his pathetic script about how we don't know how gravity works, and that's why dark matter and blah blah blah.
Dave insists that gravity simply cannot be an electric phenomenon because we know how electromagnetism works and because we know how gravity works. Mr. Dave seems to be simply uninterested in actually considering any of the theoretical models, arguments, or purported evidences which are discussed within electric universe theory.
Come on, Formscapes. Why can't you do a point-for-point response to my video? Acceleration due to gravity changing predictably and measurably according to mass and distance from the center of the gravitational field, both on Earth and other celestial bodies. The ability to know where every celestial body will be at any given time in the future. Zero variation in the freefall behavior of objects with differing magnetic properties. A profoundly detailed description of the life cycle of stars, which matches observations everywhere in the galaxy, their composition, their behavior. Line spectra, magnetohydrodynamics, Doppler imaging, satellite clocks and time dilation. Why don't you have anything to say about any of this, big guy? And what about everything I've done to invalidate everything these EU nutters have ever said? When they propose their explanation of a star, I expose inconsistencies, like negatively charged particles somehow streaming both to the star to power it and away from it in the solar wind. Positive and negatively charged particles inhabiting the same stream in the solar wind despite having opposite charge. Why can't you engage with a single concrete scientific point I make in this or any other video on the topic? Because you don't actually care about science.
yeah, I think I've gone around this video. Pretty much done. Well, I think for first stream it was alright. I know I know what to do. I figured some things out. I familiarized with myself with that. I want to look a bit into baryonic matter first. Because I've not heard non-baryonic matter being described before. Well, named. Non-baryonic. Okay. Well, let's zoom in a little bit, just to make it easier with the low resolution. So baryons are those subatomic particles. Okay, and what is a non-baryonic? Nomenclature. Wait, do they even? Neutrinos and free electrons, dark matter. Well, if dark matter, if dark matter is just on. Okay, let's see. Okay, what is dark matter? Well, they don't know, so that's a hole in there. Seems like it's just something that's not being being solved. So I don't know what non-baryonic matter does there. Anyway, thanks for speaking with me, the other viewer. Try to maybe stream again. Maybe at a better hour. Anyway, have a nice day, people. I love you all.